I think Weapons is very fun and very interesting in the moment. In the moment. I think it's a great movie in the moment, but ultimately feels like an incomplete thought. There is an aftertaste of dissatisfaction even while it's climaxing, and it has one of the most satisfying climaxes I've watched in a very long time. But something about it feels incomplete. And I was so bothered by that I actually went looking for an interview with Zach Cregger, the director and writer, after I watched it, and it validated why I felt the way I felt. So, Weapons in it, 17 kids from the same class go missing in the middle of the night. Camera footage from their homes, a lot of their homes captured them just running out of the house at 2:17 a.m. and they just disappear into the night. They're all from the same class except for this one boy. And so now this town, which isn't exactly close knit, they are grappling with what happened to them. Where did they go? Did the teacher have something to do with it? Because why was it her class? Why was it no one else's class? That's the setup of the story. I think Weapons does a lot of things very well. So like I said, it's written by Zach Cregger, directed by Zach Cregger. He directed Barbarian, which is an incredible movie that I watched for the first time last year. I forgot all about those ties when I went to see Weapons, which is good because I don't think Weapons holds a candle to Barbarian. But that's his prior work. 5 out of 5. This one, I don't believe it's a 5 out of 5. But I do think, like I said, it does a lot of things well. I love the way that it told the story. I think the pacing was great. I loved the sound mixing was incredible. The suspense. I loved the way that it used darkness. The way it let darkness linger to, let your imagination run wild for a little bit before it showed you what was happening. And the acting from everyone is incredible. And like I said before, the climax is out of this world. And yet, there's an element of that's it. Even, that's it. Like, that's really it. And I'm going to use the interview from that Zach Cregger did with the Hollywood Reporter to talk about why. So I think Weapons could teach other horror movies a lot. Directing wise, I love a lot of the camera work, the cinematography, all that stuff. But story wise, telling a complete story, like satisfactory story, where like when you're thinking about it days after, you're still satisfied. You still like it just like lights you up. I think it could learn a lot from other movies in that regard. Let's talk about it. So in terms of the story, so these kids go missing, and Zach Cregger, I believe, is a very smart man. Okay, and so I believe the parallels in this movie are intentional. The choices that he made to set us up as an audience, to build the suspense, the school, the fact that the first point of view is the teacher, the fact that the narrator is a child, the fact that the time that they went missing, almost like the time that a shooter walks into the school, the cops not really doing much, like a lot of parallels, and yet even the unnecessary flashing of what is that, an AK-47, an AR-15, that massive, so unnecessary. But like until you find out what is going on, it's not even is banging you over the head with what could have possibly happened. But then it turns out the kids are alive. They're being kept in a basement, and they're being kept by this witch who wants their life force so that she can stay alive. Not sure why 2 grown adults didn't do the trick for her. Not sure why she needed kids to do that. But the imagery and the callback to what we all know, if you live in the United States, even if you live outside the United States, you know what's going on in the United States. The imagery and the leaning on that, school shootings and all that, like, is intentional, and I'm not letting him off the hook. for using that. And so in the interview, he says that weapons was catharsis for him. He lost a friend in a random accident. And so writing this story, obviously, I don't think the final version is what he started to write, but like he talked about the element of like these kids go missing, they disappear, and like where are they disappeared from a school, they're all in the same class, like all of that was coming out as he was writing to work through his anger and his emotions from losing his friend. Okay. But he also tells the Hollywood Reporter that he knew very early on that like this was going to be a movie, or that it could be a movie, that if he could just land the plane. I don't think he landed the plane. The thing that I think he was processing the randomness of losing someone, but the way the story develops, what's random is where the hell did this old woman come from? And so there's a bit of misdirection in this movie in terms of like what we're building up, the allegory that we seem to be working with, but then it turns out it's a witch. And misdirection successfully works if the direction where we end up is as satisfying as what it was building up to, in my opinion. And the direction where we ended up is not satisfying. Yes, I said the climax is incredibly, like watching that woman get pulled apart, like the kids chasing her, like it's just so exciting, it's so incredible. But like, and so he also talks about that final chapter, Alex's chapter. He specifically is referencing alcoholism, which like when I read that from, I'm like, okay, I can see that. What does that have to do with like the where we started off? You know what I mean? So it feels like an unfinished thought. It's not completely tied off together, which when I found out that he was just working through his shit, his grief, not to be rude, he was working through grief, it makes sense. But since the story was packaged for for distribution to the masses, I think the story could have been tighter. I think the story could have been better. I think it could have tied itself much better. It didn't need to be, and it is not apparently an allegory for like school shootings or anything like that. It's a story about kids go missing and turns out it was a witch who was after them. Why we needed that weapon to be Flash and why this title, I don't know. But I think the man is smart and that he did those things on purpose to elicit or for people to make certain connections. And the connections that he ultimately made for us, which is that, hey, it's a witch, surprise, is not as satisfactory as the first connection that he wanted us to make with the title, with the guns, with the school, the child narrator, the cops, in this investigation and all that good stuff. I think Weapons is ultimately average. I think it has a lot of exciting parts. I think it has a lot of exciting elements, but story-wise, which is honestly like, I care about the story. I care about why these images were chosen, why the gun, why a school, why kids going missing. I care about that. And when you tell me, as the person who wrote it, that ain't got nothing to do with nothing, you are just exploiting this emotionally charged stuff, and that's just not impressive. You're telling me you weren't intentional with this. The only thing you were intentional with was the alcoholism and the inverted responsibility between Alex and his parents and him having to take care of them because they're like, taken or rendered incapacitated. They're incapacitated by the witch in real life, in his life, alcoholism, the way he grew up, and he calls himself an alcoholic as well. That's intentional. But the school stuff and the weapons, and that's coincidence. I think it's average. I think it's a 3 out of 5. Super exciting. I liked it. I recommend people watch at least once, but I watched it twice, and even the second time, I was more interested in my friend's reaction because she hadn't seen it yet, and the reaction of the people in the theater than in the actual story.